Okay, the unit we're looking at, we just got a very brief start into it last week, was discovering everyday rituals, prayers, or contemplative practices best encourage us in the ways of love. The whole class is on how to love. This is a unit on building resources that encourage us in the ways of love. And we have a couple of keynote texts, which we briefly looked at last week. Romans chapter 12, verses 1-2. Paul to the church in Rome, do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And then the Colossians passage, it's on page 1 if you have the sheet near you. Colossians chapter 3, verses 12-17. And the middle verses in that larger unit has this. And what crossed my mind as I thought of this as a keynote text was visualizing just these words as an open letter to our culture. An open letter to our culture. An open letter, yeah, okay. And then wondered how we might best contribute to such an open letter being heard. So here's the letter. Of course, it's written, therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly beloved. But let's suppose the letter then begins more broadly to humanity. Clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive whatever grievances you may have against one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you, and over all these virtues put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Why that strikes me as an excellent open letter to our culture, it's actually the word grievances. That it seems to me that we have a country centered on grievances now. Everybody has their grievances. The media feeds them and fuels them. We have a kind of identity politics where every identifiable group has its grievances. And then there's white grievance. And then I just think of life in general, how human it is to be aggrieved, to feel that wasn't fair. That person shouldn't have said that. That person shouldn't have done that. And I think we all struggle with it. And so I think this is a very probing text, very true to the human condition, to the human problem, and to the human solution. Bear with each other and forgive whatever grievances you may have against one another. Many cases, just let them go. Forgive as the Lord forgave you, and over all these virtues put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Okay, so we talked a little bit last week on page 2, in what ways might modern minds, such as ours, be profitably renewed. And the ones I remember were, one was slow down. Just slow down and be a little more reflective. Give a little bit of time to react reflectively and not just react. To factor God into our thinking, and then learning to live a life of love. That these would all be great ways for modern minds to be profitably renewed. And so then we talked about biblical texts that come to mind, and we looked at a couple of great ones in Psalms. and we'll move on from there this week. But I will remind you of what we basically ended with last week was the opportunity to regularly read through the Psalms, to read through the Psalms monthly. One thing to think of doing. And that would be reading, there's 150 Psalms, that would be reading 5 a day. It won't quite be as simple as 5 a day because you're going to get stuck with 119 somewhere along the way. It's got 176 verses. And then there's some other pretty long ones in there. So you could easily get fooled by the first few, which are relatively short. But the point is, if they're short, read 9 or 10. Be ready for the longer ones that are coming. But this has been monastic practice for centuries, reading through the Psalms, the liturgical hours from, I don't know what the one in the middle of the night is, Matins, or is there one before that? Looking at Eddie.
Matin is in the morning.
Yeah, but it's very early in the morning.
Right. Well, there's,
We believe there's one before that.
Yeah.
Both you and I think that, we just can't remember the name.
Yeah, I'm a Campbellite.
Yeah. Well, we're sort of rogue Campbellites because we actually know the question.
Yeah.
We just don't always know the answers.
Yeah.
But they go through the course of the day, 7 hours of the day, and a lot of the hours of prayer are centered around the Psalms. And what they do is they go through the Psalms every week. Which is emotionally a really interesting thing to do, because all the human emotions are there in the Psalms, and if you're just repeatedly going through it, there's got to be something that starts happening in your soul and in your emotionality, just from reading such profound expressions of human emotionality offered to God. So that's one thing you might look at. I'm going to look at a few other verses tonight and then save some of them for later. First one is so familiar that, well, it's actually over on page 5 in the Standards and Measures. It's there every week. 1 Corinthians 13, 4-8. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It's not rude. It's not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. That's become a classic text in Western literature, really. I mean, it's hardly, you can't find it.
I got some names of some prayers.
Oh,
Matins is nighttime, like before dawn, probably.
yeah.
And then Lauds is early morning. And then I was thinking of Vespers at sunset,
Right.
and Compline at the end of the day. And so there's
But Matins is really the first of the day.
Yeah,
what you're
sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
early morning.
Okay. So 1 Corinthians 13 is a great statement. Am I being loving? I think in most cases people know in their hearts whether they're being loving or not. They just stop and think about it. But if they need any prompts, 1 Corinthians 13 is filled with it. Galatians chapter 5, verse 6. Galatians chapter 5, verse 6. For in Christ Jesus, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision has any value. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. That is an amazing sentence. I mean, for many, many years, I'm pretty sure I never heard it quoted because it undermined all the edifices that all sorts of us had created. Paul just comes along and says, the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. And of course, he keeps writing. So obviously he thinks maybe there's more to the subject, but he's also right. I mean, that short statement is actually catches the rest of it. The only thing that counts, I'm going to throw in the word trust. The only thing that counts is trust expressing itself through love. And then later in the same chapter, you're going to come to verse 22 to 23, the fruit of the Spirit in terms of what are we trying to equip ourselves toward? We're trying to equip ourselves toward love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And then one of my favorite passages, Paul's prayer in Ephesians 3, verses 14 to 21. And it is one of my very favorite. For this reason, I kneel before the Father, from whom the whole family in heaven, from whom his whole family in heaven and on earth derives its name. I pray that out of his glorious riches, he may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all the saints to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all that we ask or imagine, according to his power that is worked within us, to him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever. I mean, that is power packed. I mean, we're going to talk about memory work in a bit, and that is one to add to the memory list. I've remembered phrases from it, but I'd really like to have it all. And we'll talk more about memory work later. But it's just powerful to be strengthened with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And then being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all the saints to grasp how wide and long, how incalculable is the love of Christ. That's what Paul is saying. Every dimension, it goes forever. And know this love that surpasses knowledge. Okay, then there's another text on equipping that you often hear, another good one, and it's in Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 to 18. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God, so that you may take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you have done everything to stand firm then with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness. Now we're flying through here. Every one of these phrases is for meditation, right? So I'm putting my Bible back together. The readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, and pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests, and so on. So that it's a great text too. It's often, when do you hear this text?
Asian Bibles.
You're trying to scare the kids? No.
Yeah. They think that children will relate to battle,
Yeah,
which it gives me the heebie-jeebies, but that's what happens.
okay. Well, there's a militancy in the way the text is usually cited. And
There's a lot of good graphics. A lot of
It's-
good graphics for kids, meaning you can have a helmet and a sword and, I mean. to some
Yeah.
I don't know if it's totally militaristic, but you do have a lot of good graphics you can put together for that.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I hear it cited when it's adults. I hear it cited more in the context of a cosmic battle between good and evil. A real sense of militancy, and it's actually an important text because it says and actually this was an important text to the last unit we did on when we may feel that people who take certain positions, they are the problem. And this text is saying our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. So Paul is saying, remember who the enemy is, and it's not one another. That's what's critical here. And I think it's particularly important in our culture because we're tending too often to distrust and downplay one another when the struggle is against powers and principalities of this dark world and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. The reason I'm reading these texts tonight and reading this particular one is to remind you that it comes after this other one in chapter 3. It's not a long book, and however you're going to read the one in chapter 6 would wisely be thought of with the context of chapter 3, verses 14 to 21, the statement of how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ. That's part of the battle we're engaged in. Okay, so here's the question, and that want to throw it open to everyone. How might we best read Scripture so as to have our minds renewed in love? So
I would say take it literally. I mean, read it and hear those words and follow them.
okay. And when we find something that we take to be a command because we take it literally and you aren't doing it, I will jump down your throat.
That's okay. I forgive you for that.
Yeah, and probably you could, but it wouldn't be judged a very loving approach widely.
Dale, I have a
I think what I'm hearing and what Art is saying is, well, let's trust it. Let's trust the word and just suppose that's, it's the word of God. Okay. How do we best read it? Because what I would note is it's often read in ways in which minds are not being renewed in love. Am I missing something here in my life experience?
No, Dale, I think a lot of times people read the Bible to try to prove their point instead of the love part of it. Like when you're having a disagreement, it's like, I'm going to find that part in there that proves what I'm saying is right, instead of worrying about loving everybody. It kind of takes the love out of it when you do that.
It's more for debating.
Right. And
points.
that's not probably the idea that we're supposed to be getting.
And there are times when you have to be reflective and discerning, but other comments? how
I
we
know,
best-
Break out your concordance.
Oh, what?
I think Robert said
I
something.
was just gonna say, break out your concordance and look up all the passages I love and reflect on them.
Well, that would be a pretty direct way to do that. How
Absolutely.
we might best read scripture so as to have our minds renewed in love.
I mean, Dale, I have to say, based on this class, in this past week, I have really, I'm gonna say, reflected on that verse in Colossians, just say, clothe myself with compassion. And actually looking at the verse in, Galatians 2 that we talked about on Sunday morning. That's a verse that, my gosh, we've heard a million times. I've been crucified with Christ. Crucified with Christ, I don't live. I mean, that's an ethic that I want to live. And I need to reflect on it. And I'm sorry that I'm getting a little emotional here, but those are verses we
love them.
hear a lot and we don't really let them penetrate.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
So we need to, and it's possible
yeah.
to simply think about them, meditate on them, and apply them to ourselves.
Yeah, and I think what, from the example you've given, one of the ways to read scripture so as to have our minds renewed in love is to keep Jesus at the center of it. And to actually keep his story at the center of it. I mean, that notion of being crucified with Christ, it's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. Reading scripture with that as my intent is going to move me much closer to a mind renewed in love. My first answer to this question is don't read it as a law code. It tells you, the Bible tells you not to read itself as a law code. Paul couldn't really have been clearer. We are under grace, not under law. We serve in the new way of the Spirit, not the old way of the written code. Christ is the end of law. The Spirit, the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. Basically, the whole argument of the Colossian letter and the Galatian letter is making that point as well. And I'm just finishing a book on a particular subject. Well, I'm not finishing it. I'm still laboring my way, and it is like hard work. It's written by a friend of mine from back in the day, but he was on a crusade, and he's talking about a particular group of people, and
What's his name?
Rubel Shelley.
Oh, okay.
Boy, that brings back memories.
Yeah. And Rubel Shelley has written many, many good books over the course of his life. He has a long and distinguished story, and he's a long and distinguished career. But at the end, he's decided to clear the field of anything open and affirming on LGBTQ. And he tries his dead level best to be loving, and he fails miserably because his eye is on the law the whole way.
Mhm.
And he ends up saying things that if I were a gay person, I would just say, forget this group. I don't want to know anything about these people. I can be more loving than this. Who are these people?
Mhm.
And Rubel can't even hear himself as he writes the book. And it's because he's looking at it through a lens that keeps him from seeing love. I mean, what I'm saying is to look at life through a lens that gives you such concern for the other person, such empathy for the other person, that you have a sense all the way along of how you're going to be heard. Not just what I want to say, how am I going to be heard? Because if that doesn't matter to me, how I'm going to be heard, then I really can't claim I'm being very loving. And that's what I didn't mean to pick on Rubel directly. I believe he and I are friends. We went to Harding Graduate School of Religion together. We've always been, I think, had a real appreciation for one another, but he just gets stuck in the middle of the book trying to make proof texting points, and then he gets carried away and links gay people with, he runs a whole list of dastardly sins and throws them in the middle of it. And I'm saying, okay, well, maybe, but let's just go with how would a gay person read that sentence? I mean, they'd be offended off the scale, and Rubel should know that. Anyone should know that. How is this sentence going to be heard by a person who disagrees with me? Is there a kinder way to put that? Is there a more loving way? That's what I'm arguing for here. I'm not even arguing that he's wrong and I'm right. I'm arguing that, okay, if you're on to solid biblical principles here, surely there's a kinder way to put this, but you lost your bearings along the way because you were thinking of scripture as a law code. And yeah.
Yeah, but the only thing that keeps me, particularly like gay people, is love. Love overrides everything. And I can't get off on, these people protesting this is sin and that's sin and this gay people are sin. But what happens if you're born like that? That's why I stay away from that subject. What happens if you're born? You follow me?
If you're born that way, you're born that way.
That's right. And I hear, oh, God could change you and God can do this and no, not necessarily.
Not necessarily is a good way to put that. But what I like you've got what we're talking about here. I mean, you're saying I am going to look at this through the lens of love.
That's right.
And that's what we're driving at, that whatever we're looking at, whatever the issue may be, we're going to look at it through the lens of love. And you know what? If you do it that way, and you really do have a solid, responsible, important point, but you're looking at it through the lens of love, considering lovingly how it will be received by other people, guess what? You're way more apt to make your point. I mean, love is the way to make the message. Even if it's a strong, powerful message that has to be made and you feel an urgency about it, slow down enough to get the love back in it.
But I think it also opens you up to receive what they have to say as well.
Right.
And I think sometimes we, particularly in our tradition, we decide on what's right and what's wrong, and we dig our heels in thinking that it's done and there's no more thinking about it. And we lose all kinds of empathy. We lose all kinds of sensitivity. We lose the opportunity to really get to see God, as Laconia would say, in that other person.
Yeah.
Dale, I do have to say it means a lot that you actually decided you wanted to read his work on it, despite knowing that you probably weren't going to agree.
His name is mentioned in the book.
Dale's? Oh,
Yep.
dear.
Yeah. Well, it's a long quote from something I wrote, and at least I will grant he got the quote right, and I would still stand by it. So I don't have a particular problem with him having done that, but it is, to me, that's what love does. I mean, I have read thousands of pages on this subject, and I have read the case that Rubel is making hundreds and hundreds of pages of that over the course of my life. I probably found 3 things in Rubel's book that were like flashes of insight, like, oh, that one I never, I've seen he's he's made me reflect on numbers of things differently, but in terms of something brand new is, oh my goodness, I need to factor that in. But I think that's what love does, is it reads the contrarian view and doesn't just assume it's got the truth. But it is hard work. Thank you, Julie. I mean, this is not a good week for me. I'm like under the cloud of law descending on these pretty vulnerable people, and man, and of course, 400 pages, and honestly, what are we doing for 400 pages but talking about sex, 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 sex? And I mean, at the end of it, I just feel immersed in sexuality, dark and arguing and powerful and destructive sexuality. And wow, my joy spot just but you know, I think I wish that people normally would understand that reading the views that are not yours is the ethical thing to do.
And
It also says something about your love for him, meaning, you know, you're willing to go through 400 pages, something
But-
you kind of know, you know, you're probably not going to agree with.
Yeah. Thank you. Jamie?
Yeah,
Yeah, also, who am I to judge? I mean, to a home, gay person, because I don't know if you're born like that or if you're not.
Yeah.
If you just turn, so in that respect, I am judging you because I don't know between those two.
And you're remembering that who are you to judge?
That's right.
And you know what, I don't think what you're thinking there is that you will never make a judgment about something, but it just means you're going to be cautious about it. You're not going to leap to judgment, you know, and that's what a person should be careful about, is that judgment is always a little suspect. Of course, we're going to discern between right and wrong and make some tough calls sometimes. But who am I to judge is the first question to ask. You could well decide on some particular issue, I think maybe I am the one to judge.
Right, some
On some
situation.
particular issue, someone has to take a stand here. And
If I know that person in particular.
well, that helps.
If
That
I
helps.
know,
Yeah, well, and you know, Scott often says that, you know, in controversial matters, that he can bring them up to anyone with whom he has a relationship. And if he doesn't have a relationship with them, it's a waste of his time to bring it up. And that's essentially true too. Art's got the floor for a second, I think. Didn't Jamie, and you jumped in at the same time there.
No, I endorse everything Jamie said.
Okay, well, that's a smart move. I try to go with that too.
You hear that, Jamie?
Okay,
Back to your question about how to read this, and when I went back to Ephesians 3, the 1 and 3, the prayer for the Ephesians. You know, if you just read it, say, if this was written to me personally, it feels like it's a love letter. I love you so much, I have to tell you this, you know, and this is all. So if I read these passages as though God was personally writing to me a love letter.
yeah. And that would be a very effective way to read scripture, so as to have your mind renewed by love.
Yeah.
A perfect example. And when you stop and you see that about that particular text, that is exactly what, I mean, he's almost like he can't find the words to express how much love there is here. I mean, and he you know, he finally like almost gives up, but in giving up, he says the most brilliant thing of all, to know that love that surpasses knowledge. Okay, we could argue about this forever. What I hope you find is the love that surpasses knowledge, that's more important than knowledge. And I mean, morals and justice and other things matter, but in the end, what it seems to be so much a religious argumentation has been about knowledge. I know more than you do, and I want you to acknowledge that. I want credit for the fact that I'm the one in the know. And so much of, to me, religious argumentation is substantially ego. And you know, it's not even about really doing the just or the right thing here. It's winning an argument. And
Well, what I tell people is, what I don't know isn't worth learning.
there was another one, Art. I hope you wrote that one down.
Thank you, Frank.
Dale, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just bugging me a little bit. That Ruby Shelley, it rings a bell. Was he on the Herald of Truth television program for the Church of Christ?
Years ago, yeah.
You know, I honestly don't know the answer to that question. The Herald of Truth has had numbers of speakers over the years. And there's been so many years now that there might have been a couple of years when he was doing it. I haven't really kept up. I don't.
Somehow it just rings a bell with me, that name. Ruby
Well,
Shelley rings a bell.
He has written enormously. He's written many books, and he's done a lot of good things for the church over the years. He's done a lot of things. He's been president of Rochester University. He was one of the preachers at Woodmont Hills, which was perhaps one of the most prestigious churches of Christ in Nashville, and really he's big in Lipscomb circles. I mean, it's definitely a name that people know. It's like Landon Saunders. It's that kind of thing. And particularly on the issue that Rubel is writing about, Landon would pull his hair out if he were still alive. I mean, Landon knows how to really communicate with people in loving ways. I would really enjoy a discussion between Landon and Rubel. How Landon would express how pained he was feeling as he read some of this. He was wondering, you wonder if there's another way you might have said this, or another way you might think about this, you know. But Landon died, of course, a few months ago. Okay, so the point is to remember that how you read scripture is going to have a real impact on whether your minds are going to be renewed in love or just renewed in knowledge and arrogance and ego, or militancy or argumentation. Okay, so here's the big question that this whole series is premised on the importance of learning to live lives of love. And the premise is that it doesn't just happen. It's learned. It's learned. And often the times we react awkwardly or even quite poorly in difficult circumstances is we didn't learn any other way to do it. We didn't know what to do in that circumstance. It's learned. It's modeled. But you have to be deliberative about it. But any other skill takes learning. So in a sense, love does. I mean, it's an emotion, but it's also something that is learned. And then my question was, as I thought of this series a year or so ago, was, and where in our society was this going to be learned? Who was setting out to teach anybody how to live lives of love. Now there are writers we're going to talk about who've done some, devoted their lives to teaching people to do that. But what institutions see as their central mission teaching people to live lives of love? And if the church isn't going to do it, then we can kind of look in our society. It doesn't seem to be getting particularly more loving. And it's because no one's feeling any responsibility to learn how. So think through, and if you will, share everyday rituals, prayers, or contemplative practices that encourage you in the ways of love. And so, in a more simple way, I could just say, and it probably puts all of us somewhat on the spot, by which I mean, okay, share your devotional practices. Oops, I've been too busy for a bunch of days. I don't have any. That would be like a human response to this. I'd be pretty understanding of that. But over the course of your life, you may remember times when you were you got it. You were particularly close to God and close to Jesus and close to his way. And what were you doing that made that a pattern in your life? What rituals, what prayers or contemplative practices? Anyone? I'm going to guess, I'm waiting for the first call, 203-322-9417, Stanford Church of Christ. Call in. The 8th caller will get a trip to, I don't know. No, but what
I'll jump in. That way it
Thank
takes up I do this regularly. Sometimes I'm better at it than at others. But Richard Foster's book, Celebration of Discipline, has impacted my life tremendously. And one of the practices in it is called DART prayers. And a DART prayer, DART, D-A-R-T,
right?
Not the game. But like with Joanne, I will walk through the hospital halls throughout the course of the day saying, Father, please be with Joanne.
Just that.
But I'll do it maybe 10 or 15 times during the day.
Yeah.
And I also do it for people I don't like. Particularly.
I don't have a whole lot to say about them.
Yeah.
But I can say something.
I can say that. And that keeps me looking at them in ways that I believe God wants me to look at them, even though I might not like them very much.
Yeah. He said a bunch there. Richard Foster's Celebration of Discipline came out about 30 years ago and is still the best book I know in answering this particular question. He gives a number of spiritual disciplines from prayer, solitude, fasting. I don't know, there's 10 or 12 of them. And every chapter is, I mean, when I first read that book, I couldn't believe anyone. Well, I couldn't believe why am I reading this for the first time? Why wasn't everybody saying this? It wasn't like he was inventing rocket science or anything. I mean, he was just saying, we can become close to God and it's not difficult. And here are the ways. But like everything else that matters in life, it takes discipline. And so celebration of discipline. But then that notion of DART prayers, I think is brilliant, because I think what keeps me from praying as often as I might want to, and maybe other people too, is the notion that I need to construct some edifice of a prayer right now. And I don't really have the time to do it. And I don't even feel I have the words right now. A dart prayer, you can probably find the words that make that dart. You know, make me kinder here.
Mhm,
You know, that's a dart prayer. You know,
mhm. What is a dark prayer?
it means,
Short
Laconia,
sentence.
help me here.
It's a,
Short sentence.
like,
Quick and easy.
like what?
I said quick and easy.
Yeah, quick and easy. That's,
Quick and easy.
yeah, quick and easy. Lord, help me with my struggle. Lord, bless Eddie, in whatever Eddie needs.
I say those all during the day.
Well, that was, it's okay, that's what you do.
Yeah.
It's a dark.
And that works. I mean, because you can do that. I mean, there's all, what I'm basically saying is, we never have an excuse not to do a dark prayer. You have excuses for not doing a whole lot of other things, but the dark prayer is brilliant, because you can find the 5 words here, just be honest. And the 5 words will come to you. What I need right now is patience.
Mhm.
You know, I need to trust that somebody's acting in good faith. Period. That's it. May I trust that so-and-so's acting in good faith? They probably are. Could I trust that? You know, that changes a whole lot of dynamics. That's a dark prayer.
And God knows the rest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
So in contrast to that, I like journaling.
Okay.
You know, writing on a page or something, you know, it's as a offering to God.
And tell us a little more about how you do that.
Whatever's on my heart.
Do you have a regular time? I mean, not a locked in time, but
Yeah.
what times lead you to your journal? I'm just trying to get
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
visualizing.
Yeah. Well, usually in the morning, I'm sitting in a comfortable spot, having a cup of coffee. It's a good time to be reflective, or just sometimes it just, oh, I need to settle down, I need to focus on something, you know, so because of a particular issue, and that's a good time to kind of sort it out. It's not like I do it every day.
Right. But you keep at it.
Mhm. Okay.
And Debbie has a secret ingredient in that. She knows shorthand.
Nobody can ever pick up these and reach my right.
I try to see what's going on in the deep, dark recesses of her mind, and I'm always eluded. What is this? Is this English? No, that's not really the point I'm making. The point I'm making is you can cover a lot of material in short order
Yeah.
because you have squiggles that mean something to you.
Yeah, yeah, so.
But we don't, so it still can be done. It doesn't count on short.
Yeah, it's just easier than, I got slowed down by the of those and in between this, so, you know, just those words, there's just squiggles.
Just need to say AI, we'll get it.
Yeah. It's mine though, and it's 50 years old, so it's generated.
Oh, okay.
Migrated.
Okay, journaling.
I mean, Dale, I have a feeling I didn't communicate this too clearly, but that was what I was trying to explain when I was saying my devotional practice was to go through verses that were familiar to me that I was really just trying to apply to myself.
Right.
You know, because some of these things are familiar, and because they're so familiar, you go, yeah, I've been crucified with Christ, yet I no longer live, but Christ dwells in me. I mean, how can you just say that without thinking about it a little bit?
Yeah, yeah.
And
Forgive
so,
what
yeah, and because of this class and the other class, I have tried to come up with verses that I would just pray over, that mostly are about ethics, about the way to live. You know, so I'm trying to compile those and contemplate them and pray over them. So that's a practice that I was trying to explain before.
Yeah, and you don't have to work real hard to find those texts in scripture. I mean, there's, you know, Leviticus has a few, but it wouldn't be where I would go first. But you know, you get to places like Romans 12. Romans 12 is just loaded with phrase after phrase to contemplatively weigh and say, what do I now do about this? Sermon on the Mount would certainly come to mind. But there's, Colossians chapter 3, which we were in, is loaded. Colossians just as good on all of that, but you just find them everywhere, and you don't need 100 of them. Today I need one. I think is what you're saying, sort of, that I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I'm
No,
saying,
and what I'm trying to say to some extent, these are the things that change your life.
yeah,
Been clothed with compassion, kindness, gentleness, humility.
yeah, a word, just a word.
Yeah. I've been clothed with compassion. That's
Yeah.
me.
Yeah,
Dale,
yeah,
I love the prayer by Saint Francis of Assisi.
yeah.
It's beautiful.
Which, do you remember some of how it goes?
It's so beautiful. I watch it on YouTube almost every night. I click it on, and before I go to bed, I like to
Okay,
watch it.
well, that'll work. That'll work. You know where to go. You know where to find.
It goes somewhat like, Lord, help me to seek more, to understand and be understood.
That's it.
And there's other
Yeah.
nice lines to it. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, and you know where to go on YouTube to find it. That's that. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about this next week. I don't see this unit being particularly long, but we will do next week with it. One of the concepts on it is we are going to talk about memory work, and I'll talk a lot more about it next week. But the advantage of memorizing something, two things. I don't care how old you are, you can do it. Because most of the things I have memorized, I did after I was 65. I probably had a lifelong resistance to rote.
Mhm.
I was trained to not trust rote. And it took me a long time into my life, and I have substantial lists of things memorized now. And there's thought, well, I'm too old. No, well, not yet. But the other thing is to have it in your mind so that when you're in a car needing to pay attention to what's happening on the road and you can't pull out books or look up anything, but you have the phrase in your head. You have the sentence in your head, and in the car, there are a few sentences that are really, really valuable as opposed to the ones that will come to you otherwise. But where it was really helpful was I remember back in COVID days going to Trader Joe's, and you'd have these long lines outside, and it was like March and April, and some of the days were still pretty cold, and they were only letting people in as people came out, and there were 80 people in front of you, and it was just like, I'm going to spend 25 minutes here, not very warm, and wasting my time, and no, because I'd already started on the memory work. I was just drilling myself, and that was a very productive 25 minutes of we're going to look at one of them next week, but a prayer that I fall back on over and over is one by Teresa of Avila, Saint Teresa of Avila, 16th century Carmelite. We'll start with it next week, but let nothing disturb you, let nothing frighten you. All things are passing away. God never changes. Patience obtains all things. Whoever has God lacks nothing. God alone suffices. All 7 of those sentences are like dynamite. And they change your perspective on everything. Let nothing disturb you. That's the first sentence that I confront every day in tight spots. You know, let nothing I'm a little disturbed here. Let nothing, I'm about to be, let nothing, you know, and you think, no, there's no reason to be disturbed by this. Not particularly my problem, you know.
Right.
No reason for me to be disturbed. Let nothing disturb you. Let nothing frighten you. All things are passing away. Did you think it was going to be exactly this way forever? That we'd all be in paradise every day for the rest of our lives? And, you know, with the same group of people and nothing would ever happen to them? And, you know, all things are passing away. Whatever it is you're thinking about, it's passing away. One day it's not going to be here, you know, but kind of get used to the idea, and it actually makes everything more valuable. You don't take stuff for granted that you used to take for granted. All things are passing away. So, you know, we'll talk more about that next week. But the advantage of having that prayer is the COVID lines there turned into pleasure.
Like oases.
Oases,
Yeah.
oases is
Yeah.
the right word.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.